Just gonna check on Rockfin really quick. Make sure that's okay. Ooh, Rockfin. Okay. Let's go.
Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati.
All right. Happy Monday, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And you can catch me here Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Quick shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. And I want to give quick shout outs to people in the chat. So welcome all. I hope you had a great weekend. Shout out to Astro. There's never going to be perfect sources or personalities. We have to get what we can from where we can and use our own minds to judge and assemble the info. But I agree that RBN is one of the best. Oh, thanks so much, Astro. That's really sweet. Shout out to Hannah G says, hi, Sabby. Greetings, Lawrence, who is a Sabby member, says Doobie Door 2024. What's going on, Angela, says the best part of Monday, the end of it. Hello and peace to all. Yeah, Mondays are rough for me. Oh, Mondays are rough. Shout out to Ilhanner, says, hi, Sabby. Greetings, Steve, says, hi, Angela. What's going on, Jean, says, hello, everyone. Shout out to Roman. Happy Monday, fam. Oh, it jumped on me again. Whoopsie. Shout out to Notori, says, rock on fire, love. What's going on, Jay, says, let's go, doobie doo. Shout out to Kim, says, hi, Sabby. Greetings. Whoops, I skipped one. Bryce. Hey, Sabby and everyone. What's going on, synchronized citizen? Okay, says hello, Sabby. Shout out to Sabby Sabs, says hi, Sabby. Greetings, Eric T. Red, who's a Sabby member, says evening all. What's going on, Eric Gray, says what up, everybody? Shout out to Hobo Roadie. There's a little cat there and there's a rock on. Shout out. What's going on? Optimism of the Will says at Angela, at Jean, at Ilhanner, at Bryce. Hello. All right, you guys got a great shout out there. What's going on, Guy? Says, got a case of the Mondays. Always, Guy. Mondays are my cringe day. What's going on, James, who's a Sabby member, says, glad I can catch live. I was camping last week. All caught up now, though, a little under the weather. So I'm going to rest and listen to my favorite YouTube news and info show. Oh, thank you so much, James. I will be camping this weekend with the Bank Sisters and many other activists in New York. I'll tell you guys about that later. We will be on Danny Haifong's show later on tonight, and we're going to talk about Camp Dada. Shout out to Rodrigo at Sabby Sab. Saw you on Useful Idiots call in today. Thank you, Rodrigo. Yeah, that was my first time actually calling into a show on call-in. Like I know some of you probably going to laugh at me, but I've never done that until today. So I didn't know what the caller experience was like. But now I see how people can accidentally hit, or if you want to hit the unmute button, you can accidentally hit in call. Cause I was like, whoa, those buttons are like right next to each other. So yikes. But yeah, I finally decided to call into a call-in show. I have a little bit of free time earlier this morning, so I did that. Shout out to Sherry, says, hello, everyone, sending good vibes and love. What's going on, gamer, says, hello. Shout out to Nancy, says, hi, Ilhanner. Greetings, Robert, says, the world just keeps getting better every day. Price gouging, austerity, record profits. Awesome. I hear you. Shout out to Yeps X. Hi, Sabby, had a pro-military ad before coming into this stream. How did I know? How did I know? They're trying to recruit people any way that they can, not just YouTube, but also Twitch. Isn't that something? What's going on? Hassan said, how's it going, everyone? And what's going on, Luis? Hello. Shout out to Monique in London, says, hello, everyone. Okay. Hi, Monarch, says, hi, Toon Sabby. All right. And shout out to Delthea, who's a Sabby member, who says, yo, what is up? What's up? What's up? Gore, son of none, says, I am ready to get in the know. Well, let's go ahead and do that then. And shout out to Female Rage, says, hey, Sabby. Shout out to Carrie, says, hello from Oregon. And greetings from Becca C, says, howdy. Let's go ahead and get into it. So I do want to give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron, as well as shout out a new Sabby patron. So let's go ahead and do the thing. All right. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. If you want to be a patron, I have 5 categories: members, Sabbies, Sabsters, Sabinators, and of course, the ultimate. All of their names are listed here. And I know I need to clean this up, you guys. I'm just finding the time is difficult. All of their names are listed here. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Let's give it up for Larry Adames. I think it's Adames, not Adams. Adames. Shout out to Larry. Thank you guys so much. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And welcome all. All right. So what are we talking about tonight? Let's go ahead and share that thumbnail. Interesting stories, you guys. Okay. Tonight, we're discussing Chris Hedges, War and Media. That is a great article. We're going to get into that tonight, and that's actually going to be connected somewhat to the next story, which is Glenn Greenwald attacks mainstream media. So we do have somewhat of a theme here tonight. I'm also going to discuss Liz Cheney pulls voters. And there's a picture of Joe Biden there. What could be happening? And should we all be concerned? And last but not least, I'm going to discuss a student debt alert, because there is something that has happened or is happening that was brought to my attention over the weekend in reference to the student loan cancellation that may affect some of you, not all of you, but some of you. And I'm going to go ahead and get into that. Let's go ahead and get started with this student debt story. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to show you a clip here from Case Study QB. This is a clip from Morning Joe, and they're actually talking about how much college costs back when some of the senators in DC went to college compared to what it costs today. Now, I will go ahead and add here, for some reason in this clip, they decided to, I guess, label today as of the year 2016. I'm not sure why they didn't do it for 2022. So just keep in mind that it's actually even higher now because it's a couple more years later. This is something that I've been discussing for a while. The cost of college, it has greatly increased. If you guys are new, you may not know, but those of you that have been with me for a while, you do know I worked in higher ed for a long time. Different schools, I do know that the tuition increase has been a problem for a lot of people, not just those who take out student loans, but also those who don't have to take out student loans. So the price of college has increased a lot, but I'm going to show you just how much it's increased. And after you see this, then you'll probably, for those of you who may be a little reluctant to want to have student loan debt cancellation, when I show you these numbers, hopefully that will change your mind. So let's go ahead and get into this clip. Shout out to Case Study QB. MSNBC Morning Joe shows the difference between the cost of college in the past and now for senators. Let's go ahead and get into that.
Look at some of these I found. This is from 2016. And mind you, the numbers are low here because from 2016 to 2022, chances are good if these trends go along, it's just been jacked up even more.
I have to pause it here. This is Kamala Harris. So Kamala Harris did attend Howard University. That is a historically Black college. It's private school. Back then, when Kamala Harris went to Howard University, it was $3,045 for tuition. In 2016, it was $23,419. Now, I happen to know a little bit more about Howard than others because I've done stories on them last year as well with the student protests that were happening there. So I will go ahead and let you know that the current tuition of Howard University today is actually over $28,000. So if you look at the difference between 1986, when she attended Howard University, and the difference for 2016 in reference to the cost, that was actually an increase of 251%. And this is exactly why I continue to tell people that when you say, well, if you take out a loan, you should pay it back, what people have to understand is that wages did not adjust for inflation. So you have college costs, such as this one, which is increased to 251%, and then wages not adjusting for inflation. Well, those college graduates are not earning the salaries that they need to earn to be able to pay off that student loan debt appropriately. And this is a big problem. And I don't know, I'm glad they did this segment. You guys know that I've been kind of critical of Morning Joe, but I'm glad that they showed these numbers because people need to see the big difference. Also, keep in mind, these are senators that they're showing. So their salaries, for the most part, are pretty well off. So keep that in mind. Let's go on.
But in 2016, when Kamala Harris was a member of the Senate, she went to Howard. Tuition then $3,000. Tuition in 2016, $23,000. An increase of 251%. Next slide, please, TJ. Next, Bill Cassidy. He went to LSU, a state university in the Deep South. Like me, he paid about $450, $500 for tuition. Today, it's $7,800, a 526% hike. Next slide.
Let's look at Bill Cassidy here because this is a perfect example of someone that attended a college that's actually a state school. LSU is not a private university, pretty good football university, but is not a private university. And the fact that he actually paid $450 when he went to college there in 1979. And you can look at the tuition hike for 2016, $9,308 for a state school. That's still too much, in my opinion. I don't think these state universities should be charging that much, especially for LSU. It's not like it's not a high ranked school. So that is an increase of 526%. Could you imagine actually paying $450 for college today? Could you guys imagine? I don't think, you know what? If I was paying $450 for college today, I wouldn't have to take out student loans, right? Interesting. Let's go on.
Slide, please, TJ. Rand Paul, Baylor University, was $2,900 in 1984. 29,000 now, a 441%.
Let's go back to Rand Paul. Look at Rand Paul here. So Rand Paul went to Baylor University in 1984. He only paid $2,910. In 2016, the increase, or it had increased to $36,360. That is an increase of 441%. Now, that's ridiculous. I just, again, think about this now. If you were from, I would say, maybe upper middle class family, 1984, you may not have had to take out any student loans if you were only paying $2,910. But $36,360 today, that is insane. That is insane. And you know what? No one has really held the universities accountable for increasing tuition the way that they have. I mean, there seems to be no cap as to how much you can increase. This is ridiculous. Look how much they've increased college tuition over the years. Interesting. Let's go on. There's more.
It's 2,900 in 1984, 29,000 now, a 441% increase in tuition. Joe Manchin, tuition $232 then. And now it's been hiked up by 457.
Okay, Joe Manchin here is another one. Attended West Virginia University. That is also a public school. His tuition was only $232. In 2016, tuition at WVU is $7,992. Again, a public university. That is an increase of 457%.
Up by 457%. You have Mike Rounds from South Dakota, and I wanted to get state colleges from across the country, from Louisiana to West Virginia, here in South Dakota.
This one is really interesting. Mike Rounds, I'll be honest with you guys, I didn't even know who this was, but he attended South Dakota State University in 1977. The tuition there was $698. Tuition in 2016 was $12,682. That's an increase of 359%. And it's interesting to me because I'm thinking to myself, how many people are applying to go to college in South Dakota? I'm not trying to be mean, but that's usually not one of the sought after states in reference to higher education. And yet here they are in 2016 charging over $12,000. Again, these state schools. So when people say that these students should try not to attend these private universities and just go to state colleges, I want to let you know that the state universities have been increasing tuition like crazy as well. I remember back when, I don't think they show this one, but I remember back when the University of North Carolina was under $10,000 a year. You don't want to see what it is today.
A 359% increase from when Senator Rounds went to South Dakota State University to today. And for the elites, if elite schools, if you go to like Yale University, like
Richard Blumenthal went to Yale University 1973. Tuition back then, and again, this is an elite private university. He only paid $2,900. In 2016, the tuition for Yale was over $49,480. So, and again, this was 2016. It's more today. So just keep that in mind. That's an increase of 216%. These universities have basically been robbing students. This is highway robbery. No amount of education should cost this much. What's that, Lawrence? Where is the money going? Oh, I'm going to get to that one. Let me finish the slide and I'm going to tell you where all the money goes. Here we go.
Most Republican populists did, Yale or Harvard or Princeton. The tuition has been hiked 216%. These numbers are indefensible. And my only point is this, Jonathan Lemire, like, go ahead. If you're going to do debt forgiveness, do it in a way that tells the universities, we're going to forgive this debt. But here's the deal. If you want universities to be able to take part in in the loan program, state colleges, you're going to have a fixed fee. Maybe it's a $5,000 tuition. Private universities, $10,000. You don't like that? That's fine. You don't have to do it. You don't have to be a part of the federal loan program. But we're no longer going to let you get rich off the backs of poor students, middle-class students, and taxpayers, because these people have priced middle-class Americans out.
This is one of the few times I've agreed with Morning Joe. Like, I'm sorry, but he's 100% correct there. Now, I will go ahead and say this. Someone was asking in the chat, is that for the total degree or is that the year? I believe that's per year. And I do have to say this in respect to Morning Joe here. Number one, I can't believe they're actually calling this out. But number two, someone just was asking me, where does the money go? I can tell you that. The money that comes into a lot of these institutions, first of all, it depends what is the I guess the great specialty at these schools, right? So if you were like me and you went to undergrad, you went to a sports school, a lot of the money is going to pay these coaches. Let's keep it real. If you're in the chat and you went to a school in the SEC, or you went to a school that was a part of the Big Ten, you know what I'm talking about. Some of these college football coaches are making a lot of money, and the basketball coaches. So if you're at a state school, a lot of times the money is going to the coaches. But at all of these schools, a lot of the money goes to the deans, the presidents of the universities. I'll give you an example. The president of Boston University makes over $2 million a year. And I don't feel bad telling you guys that because it's public information. Every year, the Boston Globe reports this information. They report the salary of all of the college presidents in Massachusetts. And that was actually how I found out that the president of Boston University actually makes more than the president of Harvard University. Make that make sense? I don't know. But that's where a lot of the money goes. And what's interesting is that you have staff members that work at these institutions, and some of them are just making enough to get by, whether they have a master's degree or not. I was an academic advisor. We don't make that much, believe it or not. Like, my job required me to have a master's degree, but I didn't make that much. And the reason why they can't pay us what we really should make is because a lot of the money is going to the deans, the faculty members. They make a lot. You'd be surprised. So something has to give here. Something has to give. Do you need to pay a college president of a university millions of dollars every year? No. The university pays for their house, you guys. They don't even pay their mortgage unless they want to have a second home. But while they are the president of that university, the university pays for the house. So why do you need $2 million a year? I don't even know how that was allowed. I'll just be honest. I don't understand. So it's tricky in reference to tuition at private universities because private universities have to fall into a certain bracket in reference to the cost of tuition. And that's why some of these schools, for example, like Duke, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, you're not going to see them charge like $10,000 a year. The rules have changed. There's a lot of business that's really involved in this, more so than it is education. You have a lot of donors that went to these colleges and they come back and they donate to these schools and they want things to be done a certain way. They want to see certain things and certain levels of performance. And if that does not happen, they can pull their donorship or not renew their donorship. And this is why I tell you that higher education is similar to the United States government when you look at the actual model. And why is that? The US government, you have a president. Universities, you have a president. Politicians in DC have donors. These universities have donors. A lot of them CEOs, millionaires. You'd be surprised. Michael Bloomberg, Robert Kraft, they donate to Harvard. So did Epstein. You see where I'm going with this? So I think that when you look at the way the US government is structured and you look at the way some of these universities are structured, then it all makes sense. Colleges also have a board of trustees. They want to see things go a certain way. It's all about money. These colleges went from being a place where, as a student, you can find yourself. You can learn things that you didn't learn at home or you didn't learn in high school. You can kind of discover who you are. It went from that to stifling creativity and becoming more of a business. That's what it's all about now. The reason why I left higher education, the industry, is because I started to see that it was more about numbers and money than it was about creativity, than it was about discovery, and then it was about fulfillment. That is why I'm no longer a part of higher ed. Let's get back into this video.
Of going to colleges and universities without the help of the federal government. And then you add the predatory lending rates on top of that. And it's just, this system is just a disaster. So why do this without having a more holistic approach?
That's a good question. And I'll answer that question for him, because colleges have become a business. And again, there was no one holding them accountable. Like, why is this happening? They realized we can make money off of this. At one point in time, you have to go way back for this. I have to double check the dates. But at one point in time, the University of California system, the school system, was free. I believe New York, I believe SUNY was like that too at one point. What happened to that? What happened to students being able to attend public universities for free? They realized you can make money in this. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I think we also need to talk about military recruitment. And this is something that I've brought up a couple of times before as well. My dad was in the military. He can testify to this. A lot of times, the military industrial complex, they heavily rely on a benefit like free college or paying off your student loans to recruit students that are in these low income Black and brown neighborhoods. That's how they recruited my dad. So if you make public universities free and you cancel all student loan debt, then the military industrial complex is going to have a difficult time recruiting those students. What are they going to offer them? Except for, oh, well, you get to travel and you'll get TRICARE health insurance, which is probably one of the best ones, I would say. But other than that, what are they going to offer them? Do you know how many friends I had that joined the military after graduating undergrad so that the military would just pay off their student loans? Not because they wanted to serve their country, just because they wanted them to pay off these loans. That's another tool that they use. This is why we're in this situation. This is part of a reason. That's why I told people they're never going to do this. They're never going to make it free, because then what would you do? How would you recruit people to join the military? What other benefit are you going to give them? Now, another question has come up in reference to this as well, and that involves, is the cancellation of the $10,000 to $20,000, is that going to be enough to make young people come out and vote? Listen to this.
A really interesting moment, because no one can really figure, that I've been spoken to at least, no one has a good idea of how much this is actually going to help the Democrats. It might well hurt them. The problem is that the people that are most avid for this are kind of young, very politically engaged voters who have put a lot of pressure on the administration, successfully, obviously. The problem is those people already vote. They're already solidly in the Democratic camp, and they are already solidly turning out at higher rates. Educated voters in general turn out at higher rates than non-educated voters. and young voters don't turn out that much at all. So you've got two groups where you're like, either they're going to come out and vote for us or they're not going to come out. How many people is this really moving to the polls? I am somewhat skeptical that this is actually going to be long-term helpful for the administration, but obviously he made it a promise. He was under fierce pressure, and a lot of Democrats in high-cost areas like New York were putting a lot of pressure on the president to do this, and I think he eventually just said, okay, let's do it.
We'll see how it plays out, but at the end of the day, 43 million people will have a little bit easier time.
Is $10,000 student loan cancellation or $20,000 student loan cancellation, is that going to be enough to make the younger base come out? I don't know. I really think that if you really wanted to get the younger voters to come out, you really needed to cancel all of it. And I've said this before, like this, it helps. It's something, it's not nothing, but is it enough to push me to go out and vote, to keep Joe Biden in office or whoever's going to run in his place? No. I'm sorry, but we need to talk about this here, right? She went on to tell you that most of the college educated voters are already coming out to vote anyway. Maybe. She went on to tell you that a lot of the younger voters that are getting this debt cancellation typically don't come out and vote. So I'm sorry, but I told you, if you really want to get the young base to come out, you have to have something that is bold. And this isn't bold. Look at the numbers. Look at how young voters, I thought, and I got to tell you, I was a part of this crowd. So I was there at the rallies and I was there when it was time to vote in the primaries. And I have to say, I was somewhat disappointed. The number of younger people, the younger turnout to vote for Bernie Sanders in the primaries here in Massachusetts. Where was the turnout? And there were a lot of things on the table, for that. So I don't know. But I do know that I did see this over the weekend, and I think this is something that should be mentioned. Now, I didn't know about this, so I have to update you guys. Did you know that there may be some tax liability for the student loan cancellation, depending on what state you live in? Let's go ahead and chat about that for just a second. These 13 states may hit borrowers with up to $1,100 in state tax liability on forgiven student loans. How to know if your debt cancellation will trigger a bill. Let's go ahead and get into that. Now, again, this came out over the weekend. I'm just going to get straight to the nugget here. President Joe Biden, student loan forgiveness plan will soon cancel debt for millions of Americans, and the relief is tax-free on federal returns. However, experts say the cancellation may trigger a state tax bill. Most borrowers making less than $125,000 per year or $250,000 for married couples filing together will qualify for the $10,000 of forgiveness with up to $20,000 of cancellation for Pell Grant recipients. However, some states may count the canceled debt as income. Now, this is explained by Jared. He's the vice president of state projects at the Tax Foundation. Stay tuned, guys, just to see if your state appears on this list. Of course, mine does. This may affect borrowers in more than a dozen states, adding a maximum state liability of roughly $300 to $1,100, according to Walzak, based on a preliminary analysis from the organization. These states may include, here we go, Arkansas, Hawaii, Idaho, Kentucky, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Minnesota, New York, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wisconsin, as the analysis shows. I'm going to pause here for a second so you can see the states listed here. I knew Massachusetts would be one of them. I just knew we would end up on this list. Yes, Sebastian, Taxachusetts, of course. You know they were coming for us. You know they're going to tax us for every damn thing. But so that is roughly between $300 to $1,100. So just keep this in mind. If your state's on this list, you know, give a shout out in the chat. I don't know. My state's on here. But even if I would have stayed in South Carolina, I still would have been on here. Isn't that a damn shame? In fact, if I would have stayed in New York, I would be on here too. Damn. Interesting. The American Rescue Plan of 2021 made student loan forgiveness federally tax-free through 2025. And the law covers Biden's forgiveness too, according to the White House. Generally speaking, states use the federal tax code as a baseline for how they define taxability. And that's coming from Walzak, explaining how some use what's known as conformity to follow certain federal legislation. Some states have rolling conformity. They kill me with this. Updating state tax legislation as federal laws change, and others may only conform from a certain date, which may require updates to match the current law. So in some cases, states may decouple from certain federal provisions to make the state tax code its own. Since canceled debt is generally taxable, there are a patchwork of approaches, most of which were not ever really about student loan debt. State treatment of forgiveness may change. While the preliminary analysis shows some states may tax student loan forgiveness, there's still time for policy changes. States could come back very early in the next legislative legislative session, update their conformity statute, and make it effective immediately. So again, I don't know you guys, but I'm sorry, but you guys know how I feel about student loans. So I do have to keep you in the know with this. And again, I just found out about this over the weekend. Obviously, I'm happy for student loan debt cancellation. I did want him to cancel all of it, but I knew that he wouldn't. So here we are. But I will say that if you live, again, in one of these states, just pay attention to what's going on here. Someone was asking me, is Montana on this list? It is not. So here's the list one more time. Arkansas, Hawaii, Idaho, Kentucky, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Mississippi, New York, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wisconsin, the analysis shows. So, yeah, those are the states there, you guys. So, I mean, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but let's just keep an eye on that. Okay. If you live in one of those states, let's keep an eye on that. I see loads of comments here in the chat. I'm gonna go to some of the comments here. Sure, sup. At Sabby Sabs, what did you say on Useful Idiots? I talked about student loan debt. I told you. This is my thing. Thanks for the super sticker, Becca Sia. Thank you so much. Lawrence says 71 days until the end of the Democratic Party. We'll see, Lawrence. I don't know what's going to happen. We'll see. Joe OWS, in 1983, I received $10,200 for the GI Bill and paid it for my entire college because tuition was free and all I had to do was buy the books, Pell Grants, and offered living expenses. Yeah. I think my dad got GI Bill too. James says tuition has increased way above inflation, so that's even worse when you consider that wages haven't even kept up with inflation. That's right. That's that other added piece there, right? Thanks for the super chat, Steve. Sabby, do a show on Ashley Biden's diary. Sounds extremely damaging. Weird stuff here. Yeah, I need more info. Like I saw screenshots And some of the writing I couldn't even read because of the handwriting. It looked kind of scribbled, but I need to have more info before I get into that, because I like to be careful about those types of things, meaning Sabby needs more receipts, basically. Danny at Sabby Sabs, what exactly is an endowment? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. So endowment, in reference to money that's given to the university, for example, Harvard University and MIT, I can only speak in reference to Massachusetts, they have the largest endowments out of all of the colleges here, right? And when you have a large endowment, they have raised a lot of money. That means that you can afford to pay people more. So if you're a faculty member at Harvard, you're most likely going to be paid more than you were if you're a faculty member at University of Massachusetts. Just keeping it real. But they have a lot of money coming into those types of schools. And again, a lot of it has to deal with who their donors are, who their alumni are. They're in positions where they're CEOs. Some of them are millionaires. I told you, Jeffrey Epstein donated to Harvard. He also donated to MIT. So those schools have a lot more money. There's a lot more that they can do. Just keeping it real. Kim says, no, Sabby, SUNY was free. When the city went bankrupt in 1974, the city started charging. SUNY was never free. You're right. I got these wrong. City University of New York and State University of New York. Thank you so much for that correction, Kim. Delthea says, do you want young people to vote, cancel all debt, pass a thriving wage, pass a federal jobs guarantee? Boom. There you go. Collins in the chat. I have $18,000 in student loan debt left, and I'm up to having all of my debt forgiven as I had a Pell Grant in college. Whoop, whoop. All right. I'm still not voting Democrat. Well, congratulations, Colin. So there's your answer, you guys. Thanks for the super chat, Carrie. Door Hedges 24, perfect balance of entertainment / comedy and policy. I asked Chris Hedges if he would run. He said no. I tried. Sorry, Colin, that was hilarious. You got me on that one. Oh, man. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Whee! All right. Thanks for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sabrina, back in those days, you have to remember there was not emphasis put on going to college. So a high school diploma was good enough, and you went and got a job at a factory. Not to mention, there was a lot of vocational schools and apprenticeship programs also. So that was one of the reasons why college enrollment was low. It wasn't until the 80s where they started pushing people to go to college. That's a good point, Roger. And thank you for this tip as well. Regarding a lot of younger voters, the military is already having a hard time recruiting. They are looking at what happened to you millennials in Iraq and Jon Stewart trying to get veterans their benefits. So Gen Z are like, screw that. Also, remember, recruiters get bonuses for how many enlist. So they always want to go to those poor neighborhoods, just like a customer I picked up from local Marine barracks. Yep. Military is so desperate, they bringing back hits from the 80s like Top Gun. Plus, notice how the 1980s after-school cartoon series G.I. Joe is in heavy rotation on YouTube. Oh, I didn't realize that. Yet Transformers are nowhere to be found. Uh-huh. Good points there, Roger Meadows. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but did you know that they actually had military recruiters at some of the movie theaters for the new Top Gun movie? How desperate can you get? How desperate can you get? Let's not go there, right? Wow, that's a doozy. Thank you for the super chat, NK. Those states better tax the forgiven PPE loans. I don't think they're going to do that, NK. At least not so far what I've seen. You know what? I haven't done this in a long time, but Colin, I think this is the comment of the night so far. I'm still not voting Democrat. Oh, buddy. Okay, let's go ahead and get into our next story. Now, I don't know if everyone has been aware, but yes, even though Liz Cheney has lost her primary, there are talks of Liz Cheney possibly running for president in 2024. And I don't mean to roll my eyes. I don't usually do that on here, but it was one of those moments. And I'm sorry. It's interesting to me the way that commentators on mainstream media and the way that Democrats are talking about this. The idea of Liz Cheney running as an independent. So it's interesting because they don't want anyone else to run as an independent. They don't want anyone else to run third party either. But they seem to be, they're kind of okay with the possibility of Liz Cheney doing it. I can't. Let's get into it. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Polling shows Liz Cheney will take votes away from Biden if she ran in 2024 as an independent. Let's go ahead and get into it.
As questions swirl about whether outgoing Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney will pose a challenge to former President Trump's expected 2024 presidential bid, new polling suggests her candidacy actually would hurt the current president more than his predecessor. In the latest survey from Yahoo News and YouGov, 46% of registered voters say if the 2024 presidential election were a two-way race between President Biden and Trump, they would back the current president. But
let's look at this for a second. Now, this is the YouGov poll. 46% say they would support Joe Biden if it were today. 42% said Donald Trump. And 12% said undecided. This is what happens. You guys see this? This is what happens when you give people two options that people don't really want. Now let's look at the details here. This is among 1,563 registered voters. So keep that in mind. That's registered voters. And that's a little over 1,500 people. I wonder what it would be if they asked more people. Let's go back in.
But when Cheney enters the mix as an independent, look at this. Trump wins the three-way race with 40% of the votes in that scenario. 17% of voters do say they are undecided.
Okay, so if you throw Liz Cheney in, this is just what they're saying, their thoughts, not necessarily mine. If you throw Liz Cheney in the mix here, now you have Donald Trump with 40%, Joe Biden with 32%, Liz Cheney with 11%. That's pretty high for an independent. Again, keep in mind, this is only a little bit over 1,500 registered voters that they're counting here. And then 17%, the number of undecided went up. 17% undecided. You know, what's really interesting, look how many of them shifted from Joe Biden to either Liz Cheney or undecided. And so here's the question here. Let's go back to look at this previous poll here. Okay, so in the previous poll, Joe Biden had 46%, Donald Trump had 42%. 12% undecided. Snapshot, 46, 42, 12. And now in the new poll, if you add in Liz Cheney, Joe Biden drops to 32%. And that's interesting because that's showing you that some of those voters for Joe Biden also went to the undecided category here, 17%, because that went up, right? And some of them either went to Liz Cheney and some of them could have gone to Donald Trump, believe it or not. But what does that tell you, right? What does that tell you? That some Democrats are actually willing to vote for Liz Cheney? Really? Warmonger Liz Cheney? You guys see how it's just one party? You see how it's just one corporate party? This is really interesting. So, again, I would like to see more voters. I would like to see a larger number, a larger sample size, but I guess this is pretty typical. But for him to drop from 32% to, 46 to 32%, once you throw in Liz Cheney, that's interesting. You know what that tells you also? Is that if voters have more options, they can choose the other option. That tells you that those voters, some of them that selected Joe Biden on the first question, didn't really want Joe Biden. They didn't really want Donald Trump or Joe Biden, but they're probably thinking, oh, lesser of two evils, so I'll go with Joe Biden. When you give people more options, then they start to say, oh, wait a minute, I think I'll vote for an independent. This is what they don't want. So don't get me wrong. I'm not cheering on Liz Cheney by any means. She's a warmonger and she's ridiculous. I don't know what she's trying to do here. But this is what they are afraid of. They are afraid of giving people more options. This is why they would smear someone like Jill Stein, right? Now, they have no problem promoting and discussing Liz Cheney running as an independent, but they have a problem with anybody else doing it. Anyone on the outside, they got a problem with it. What does that tell you? One corporate party.
Following her Republican primary defeat last week, Cheney said she would consider a presidential run. She's not said, though, whether that would be as a Republican or as an independent. So this was the suspicion of many people, at least, that if she ran for president trying to take down President Trump, she might actually take down President Biden.
Exactly, because who would be the voters who would move from Donald Trump to Liz Cheney? Not that many people. If you're a hardcore committed Donald Trump voter, you don't just move over to Liz Cheney. It's taking some never Trumpers who then don't vote for Joe Biden. So maybe she could really damage him in the Republican primary, and her presence in the Republican primary would stunt Trump, much the way that Marco Rubio was taken out by Chris Christie, perhaps, but in the general does not help Joe Biden at all.
So Sam Stein, this is why many.
But I think why I would say Joe Biden doesn't help himself. Like, I'm sorry, if you are that strong of a candidate, throwing in someone like Liz Cheney as an independent, your numbers should still hold. If you're that strong of a candidate, even throwing in someone else like a Liz Cheney, who, again, like I said, she just lost her primary, your numbers should still hold. They shouldn't drop that low. 46-32. But he's not. That's the problem. The commentators look scared, huh? They look very concerned. They're like, uh-oh, look at this guy's face.
Democratic strategists are saying, applause for you, Liz Cheney, standing up to Donald Trump, leading this fight against his attempt to overturn the 2020 election. But please do not run for president.
Well, let's start by stipulating that this is painfully early for 2024 conversations, but I hope. But I think I agree with all the analysis. It's hard to see how she could impact an election in the way she wants while running in that election. Elise is absolutely right. Her candidacy would draw support away from Biden by getting never Trumpers to vote for her and not him. I think that the damage she could inflict, if that's what she wants to do, and all indications are that's what she wants to do, would be through the form of a primary bid, but even that would be so long shot at this juncture. So my suspicion is she knows this stuff. She's pretty wise politically. She understands how this works, and that she ends up doing something entirely different than running for president, maybe launching an organization or some sort that could do ads or organizing in the course of the Republican primary and then ultimately in a general election to try to defeat Donald Trump, which she has stated is her preeminent goal at this juncture.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to chime in here for just a second. Do you guys honestly think that Liz Cheney would beat Donald Trump? I don't think so. I never thought that, by the way. When they first entertained this idea, when Robert Reich wrote an article about it in The Guardian, and he was pushing Liz Cheney, I picked on them for that, by the way. He was pushing Liz Cheney for president, to run for president. I never thought that she would beat Donald Trump. Still don't believe that. Because here's the thing. I know Trump voters. I know plenty of people that voted for Donald Trump. And not necessarily for the reasons you may think. Some of them just hated Hillary Clinton. Some of them wanted to vote for someone who wasn't a politician. Some of them just don't like Joe Biden, right? So I know plenty of people who voted for Donald Trump, especially if I go back south to visit my family. There's a lot of Trump supporters. So I don't know why they thought this would be a good idea. I mean, look at what happened before when Trump ran in 2016. They thought Jeb Bush was going to be a good idea. Jeb Bush was putting people to sleep. Then they said maybe Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz was also just people were not interested. And then you had Marco Rubio. Didn't hold that interest with people, right? Imagine Donald Trump and Liz Cheney in a debate on the debate stage. Who do you think will win that debate? You see the problem? I don't know.
I mean, Rev, she has said, my goal here is not to be a spoiler, is to prevent Donald Trump from ever stepping foot in the White House again. So maybe that comes from the outside rather than running in the race.
Or if she chooses, if she just decides she has to run in the primaries. I mean, I would love to see some Republican primary debates with Liz Cheney against Donald Trump. I would really love to see. She could really weaken him with body punches from the inside. But
So he said she can really weaken him. He really believes this. I don't. I really don't.
I think one thing that we should miss about this poll is it does say that on a head-to-head, and I agree that we're painfully early here talking about it, on a head-to-head, Biden beats Trump. And I think what the Democrats need to look at is who other than Biden can beat Trump. According to this poll, he can beat him by 4 points. I don't know there's another Democrat that we could poll that can do that. So all of this age talk, we need to start looking at, but the polls say he can beat Trump. Who else can beat Trump? While we're on Cheney land here, the Democrats need to do a little inspection on who they have in their in the backup here if Biden does not keep his word and run. And I think so far he's saying, and I think he really means that he's going to run.
Yeah, who exactly?
You guys hear this? This logic. This poll right now is showing you that Joe Biden would beat Trump. But think about what Joe Biden just did, right? Canceling some of the student loan debt, right? So think about that. And think about the fact that, remember, in the 2016 race between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, remember earlier on, it said that Hillary Clinton was going to beat Trump too. Things change as you get closer to the actual date. And I think, I'm sorry, but the fact that Al Sharpton has to sit here and say the Democrats need to think about who else can beat Trump besides Joe Biden, it's just, I'm sorry. I honestly don't think Joe Biden would beat Trump. I really don't. You know how many people have already told me that they're voting Republican in 2024? You know how many people told me that? I told them that's ridiculous. That if you're mad at the Democrats, you're mad at the two-party system, vote third party, vote independent. But some people are that angry that they're just like, screw this. They said they're voting Republican. I've heard it from several people. So again, I want to remind you that poll was just a little bit over 1,500 people. I don't think Joe Biden would beat Trump in 2024. I really don't. I think it would be pretty close, but I don't think he would beat him. And I think one of the things that would turn some people off is the way that he handled the mandates. That's one of the things that would turn some people off. But To each his own.
Exactly, trotting out of the bullpen, Mike. That's the question. And that's something President Biden has said himself. The White House has said, I see all these polls that say 70% of Democrats don't want me to run again. But I also see the polls that say 98% of you would vote for me again against Donald Trump because you know I'm the guy who've already beat him and can beat him again. That's their argument.
But the reason why he beat him last time, again, part of that was because of the pandemic, right? Part of that was because of the fact that, oh God, people were like, we don't want another year of Trump or whatever. But it wasn't like people were crazy about Joe Biden. It wasn't like people were like, oh my God, I can't wait to vote for Joe Biden. It was really interesting to me. I never saw Joe Biden sign in any of the yards here in Massachusetts. Not once, but he won Massachusetts. That was interesting. I saw Bernie signs everywhere. Bernie and Pete Buttigieg. Makes you wonder, huh? Really makes you wonder. Now they go on to say, or he mentioned earlier that who else would beat Trump? I think his time is past now, but I think Bernie Sanders in 2016, I think he would have beaten Donald Trump. Call me crazy, but the DNC was never going to let him get there. Let's just be real. Okay, let's go to some of the comments here before we go to the next story. Lawrence says, I think the pollers found the 20 Democratic voters that have not left the party. Right? Thank you for the super chat, AJF. For a while, I respected Robert Reich, but after I was aware he pushed for Liz for president, I accepted that liberals can't be taken seriously. No, it's true. Thank you for this super chat as well as progressives who don't call themselves leftists. Democrats have messed up those two labels. I agree. Everybody's progressive now. Have you noticed? Dana says, I'm voting for my dog. Kudos, Dana. Do what you got to do. I think there's a comment on Rockfin. Eric, I can take that. Thanks for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. When the government does not do its job, it's up to the people to react. You know what it is. High schoolers study abroad for free and get paid for it because American college and universities to go under and give them a choice, make it free or go under. Thank you for this tip on Rockfin, female rage. Hashtag all Cheneys are dicks. Thank you for that. Oh dear. We're going to get into our next story. And this one is about Chris Hedges. Now, you guys know, I've told you guys before that I think you need to follow his Substack. It's really good. And I don't have time to like read everyone's Substack. It sucks because there's a lot of good content out there. But I always make an effort to read his because I feel like I learn something from it every time. Now, this story actually is going to make a connection to the Glenn Greenwald story. And I think just so happened that way. I didn't plan it that way. It just so happened that way. But in this recent article here, Chris Hedges is talking about Ukraine and the politics of permanent war. What he does in this article, he makes the connection between war and censorship. And I think after you hear this, I'm not going to read the entire article because that kind of defeats the purpose of you going and reading the article. But there are certain parts here that I do want to touch on. And I do want to say that after you hear this tonight, it may show you something in reference to censorship where it's more of a larger picture here than you realize. After you hear this and after you see the clip from Glenn Greenwald, we're going to combine this all together. And I swear, I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. So this article, Ukraine and the Politics of Permanent War. Let's go ahead and get into it. This is by Chris Hedges from the Chris Hedges Report on Substack. Eric, feel free to put the link in the chat to this. Permanent war requires permanent censorship. Remember that, because we're going to come back to that. So here we go. No one including the most bullish supporters of Ukraine, expect the nation's war with Russia to end soon. The fighting has been reduced to artillery duels across hundreds of miles of front lines and creeping advances and retreats. Ukraine, like Afghanistan, will bleed for a very long time. This is by design. Now, I do want to chime in here. It kind of reminds me of an interview that Julian Assange had where he said the goal is not actually to win. The goal is to have a never-ending war. And that's the way this conflict appears to be heading from what I've seen so far. Let's go back in. On August 24th, the Biden administration announced yet another massive military aid package to Ukraine worth nearly $3 billion. It will take months and in some cases years for this military equipment to reach Ukraine. And another sign that Washington assumes the conflict will be a long war of attrition. It will give a name to the U.S. military assistance mission in Ukraine and make it a separate command overseen by 2 or 3-star general. Since August 2021, this is important, Biden has approved more than $8 billion in weapons transfers from existing stockpiles, known as drawdowns, to be shipped to Ukraine, which do not require congressional approval. Remember this. Remember, it goes further than the $40 billion package that Congress approved, that they voted on to send to Ukraine.
Well, that happened all of a sudden. Yeah, Sabby said she was still having internet trouble, and I think that's a yes. She is still having internet trouble. Although she told me the other day, oh, you popped back.
Yeah, I don't know if am I connected? Oh, I am connected.
You're on there. You said they cut down that tree, but you're still having trouble, huh?
Yeah, those bombs. It says it's on Wi-Fi. That's not what I meant to be on. Mobile hotspot. I just want to make sure that was on my phone just in case. Okay, I'll go back. I think I'm still good. Okay.
Back on.
I have to log back into Tight V and see it disconnected me. Okay, back to where I was. So that's important to note, including humanitarian assistance, replenishing depleting U.S. weapon stocks, expanding U.S. troop presence in Europe. Congress has approved over $53.6 billion. So it's a lot, you guys. Our approved assistance to Ukraine is more than twice these amounts. So that's going into numbers here for the Center for Disease Control. And he's saying just how much we have contributed to them. Now, let's go ahead and get to the part here about the media. The mass media cravenly decimates these binary absurdities in 24-hour news cycles. It's news celebrities and experts, universally drawn from the intelligence community and military, rarely deviate from the approved script. Day and night, the drums of war never stop beating. Its goal to keep billions of dollars flowing into the hands of the war industry and prevent the public from asking inconvenient questions. This is the role where mainstream media comes in, right? Because I remember, and I don't know if everyone is old enough to remember this, but I remember when the war in Iraq started, and it was very difficult to find a narrative that went against mainstream media at that point. There was no Facebook at that time. I'm trying to remember correctly. I don't think Facebook was around at that point. There was, no TikTok or all of these other social media platforms that we use, right? And I didn't know many independent media journalists at that time. it was very easy to believe what we were told. Now, yes, years later, they did admit that, look, we were sold a lie. But at that time, when it was happening, I look back sometimes and I wondered, like, why did I not even question it? And then I have to remember what I was being told. I couldn't find one mainstream media outlet that wasn't advocating for it. And again, I didn't know much about independent media back then. So it was really easy to believe as a part of the American public that we were doing the right thing. And it wasn't until I got older and I started doing my own research and I realized, I don't think we were doing the right thing. Same thing with Afghanistan. We weren't doing the right thing. But the reason why that narrative exists, the reason why it's in place is because there's a lot of money to be made off of these wars, this war industry. And so the mainstream media has the same talking points as the United States government. This is true to a T, by the way. If you look at what the US government says and you look at what mainstream media says, it's pretty much the same. That's on purpose. So let's go back in. Oh, thank you for that, Graham. 2004 Facebook. Okay, thanks. Okay, so he goes on to say, in the face of this barrage, no dissent is permitted. None. CBS News caved to pressure and retracted its documentary, which charged that only 30% of arms shipped to Ukraine were making it to the front lines, which the rest siphoned off to the black market. A finding that was separately reported upon by U.S. journalist Lindsay Snell. CNN has acknowledged there is no oversight of weapons once they arrive in Ukraine, long considered the most corrupt country in Europe. According to a poll of executives responsible for tackling fraud completed by Ernst & Young in 2018, Ukraine was ranked the 9th most corrupt nation from 53 surveyed. Now, why did they have to change their story? Why did they have to hide certain information? Because that's not what the government wants you to know. If you know that, if more people know that, then more people would be livid, I would think, at the fact that we've given them so much money and we're still giving them money. They don't want you to know that, so we got to pull that back. No, let's cut that story. This is how they control the narrative. Let's go in. War, we're going to go to this paragraph here. War is the primary business of the U.S. empire and the bedrock of the U.S. economy. The two ruling political parties slavishly perpetuate permanent war, as they do austerity programs, trade deals, the virtual tax boycott for corporations and the rich, wholesale government surveillance, the militarization of the police, and the maintenance of the largest prison system in the world. They bow before the dictates of the militarist who have created a state within a state. This militarism, as Seymour writes in The Permanent War Economy, American Capitalism in Decline, is fundamentally contradictory to the formation of a new political economy based upon democracy, instead of hierarchy in the workplace and the rest of society. The idea that war economy brings prosperity has become more than an American illusion. This comes from Melman. When converted, as it has been, into ideology that justifies the militarization of society and moral debasement, as in Vietnam, then critical reassessment of that illusion is a matter of urgency. It is a primary responsibility of thoughtful people who are committed to humane values to confront and respond to the prospect that deterioration of American economy and society owing to the ravages of the war economy can become irreversible. If permanent war is to be halted, the ideological control of that war industry must be shattered. The war industry's funding of politicians, research centers, and think tanks, as well as its domination of media monopolies, must end. They control all of it. All of the outlets are controlled. Why do you guys think they're trying to smear, some of these anti-war voices so much? Why do you think they're coming after them? They don't want people to hear that side of it. They only want people to hear the narrative that they want them to hear, so that they can continue to think, and this is really strong in America, this whole idea of, yay, rah, rah, America, we're the best, America first. They want people to still have that mindset, to still have that mentality, so that they won't ask questions to the US government and ask them, why are you still giving them all of this money, but you're not giving anything to the American people? Why is the military industrial complex, why is the budget so bloated and that so little was given to the American people? Because if you know the whole story, if everyone knew the whole story, then more people would ask questions. Then more people would push back. And here's another little trick. As long as they keep you divided over left versus right, instead of actually pushing back on the core issue, we will constantly push back against the president that's in office that's not on our team. And that's the problem. Some of the people right now that are speaking out against this whole conflict in Ukraine is not so much because they don't agree with the conflict and the spending. It's more so because they don't agree with it because Biden's doing it and he's not on their team. But what if we got rid of the labels? What if we got rid of the left versus right and we just had people just focus on the issues at hand? That's what they don't want us to do. They don't want people to just look at the issues. They want people to belong to their party, their political party, and do what the party tells them to do. And this is the problem. There's a lot of money to be made in war. A lot. So I go on to say here, I'm going to scoot down to this portion here about critics. Critics already shout out from corporate media. They're relentlessly attacked, discredited, and silenced for speaking a truth that threatens the public's quiescence. I hope I said that correctly. Quiescence, while the U.S. Treasury is pillaged by the war industry and the nation disemboweled. Look at this, guys. You see the problem? The U.S. Treasury is pillaged by the war industry and the nation is disemboweled. This is what they do. Now, there are two links here where he does talk to Matt Taibbi about this as well. Those are previous videos, so you can check that out as well. And then there's this portion here I wanted to talk about as well. The war industry, defied by the mass media, including the entertainment industry, is never held accountable for the military fiascos, cost overruns, dud weapon systems, and proliferate waste. No matter how many disasters from Vietnam to Afghanistan it orchestrates, it is showered with larger and larger amounts of federal funds, nearly half of all the government's discretionary spending. The monopolization of capital by the military has driven the U.S. debt to over $30 trillion, $6 trillion more than the U.S. GDP of $24 trillion. Servicing this debt costs $300 billion a year. We're spending more on the military, $813 billion for fiscal year 2023, than the next 9 countries, including China and Russia combined. And there's one more piece I want to add here as well about the military industrial complex and when it comes to climate change. For those of you who are really passionate about climate change, you do know that no amount of recycling that you do, no matter how many of us buy electric vehicles, none of that is going to undo or is going to be greater enough to take out the damage that is done by the military industrial complex when it comes to the environment. That is the most powerful source. And so if you really want to tackle climate change, you have to tackle the MIC. And climate scientists know that. And I'm pretty sure a lot of our politicians know that, but they're not going to tell the American people that because they like to make money off of the military and war. One more portion here that I do want to highlight as well. He goes on to talk about NewsGuard. Let me just go down here. This piece here about the censorship. Did I get to that part? Oh, I passed it. Sorry. Yes, this piece here about the censorship. This is another thing that they've been doing to journalists as well. Let's go into the YouTube effect. Negative ratings will drive away advertisers, which is the intent. It is also a very short step from blacklisting these sites to censoring them, as happened when YouTube erased 6 years of my show on Contact that was broadcast on RT America and RT International. Not one show was about Russia. This is true. I think you can actually still catch some of those episodes. Shoot. There's someone on YouTube. They have a channel called Hedges Fan. I think it's Chris Hedges Fan. And they actually have like a lot of his clips. So I'm assuming they did that on their own, but you can catch some of those if you want to go back and see. Now, it goes on to say, not one show was about Russia and not one violated the guidelines for contempt imposed by YouTube, but many did examine the evils of U.S. militarism. Now, it goes on to say here, they talk about Consortium News. PayPal's cancellation of Consortium News account is an evident attempt to defund it for what it's almost certainly the company's view, that Consortium News violated its restrictions on providing false or misleading information. It cannot be known with 100% certainty because PayPal is hiding behind its reasons. But Consortium News trades in information and nothing else. So that was another one that was targeted as well, right? So I say all of this, and I want to go ahead and go back up to the very top of this article. Again, feel free to read the entire article. There were a couple of things I pointed out, but read the entire article. Permanent war requires permanent censorship. As long as we have these never-ending wars, we will always have censorship. I'm going to go to some of the comments, and then I'm going to get to Glenn Greenwald's piece about censorship and independent journalism. And I want you guys to try to make the connection here, because Chris Hedges pointed out something that I didn't really think about before. As long as we have those never-ending wars, again, the goal is not necessarily to win. We'll always have censorship. Desert Mantis says, makes perfect sense. Yeah, I mean, I never thought about it that way, but he has a point. Go to some of the comments here. I'm not sure where I left off. Oh, Oh, I've read Collins. Okay. Thank you for the super chat, AJF. I know it can be off-putting, but you are not obligated to vote for anyone. It is about voting for policies, not against. Representing isn't disapproving. That's a good point, AJF. Thank you so much for the super sticker. JM is in the house. Thank you for this super chat, AJF. Leftists notice that Democrats do not call themselves leftists. So why are you voting for them? Shrug. Swift BMF. I was 23 when they went into Iraq, and I was on the Iraq War March in London, and even a million of us couldn't make a dent in the propaganda. Yeah, so Swift BMF, you remember. Thank you for the super sticker, JM. Elizabeth said, yep, just got into a fight with my boomer parents about this. I feel you, Elizabeth. I feel you. Thank you for this super sticker, Doc. This is a democracy if you agree with us. I like that one, Doc. Colin, I don't know. You and Doc might be tied for the best comment. I don't know, Colin. I don't know. I'll take those comments on Rockfin. Excuse me. Then we'll get to the Glenn story. Awesome. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. Another story that would not exist if we abolished all political parties. That's right. Yeah. And thank you for this tip as well, Roger. Sabrina, you had to go to local Black media to find those who were suspicious about Iraq. A few months after September 11 to beginning of 2002, the late, great James Mtume, who gave us hits like Juicy Fruit that Biggie used for his version, co-hosted a show on Sunday nights on Urban Radio NYC. He said, Bush, they're going to find a way to use this to shift from Afghanistan and Osama to Iraq. 13 to 16 months later, we were in Iraq. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for this tip on Rockfin, Jacob, bandtruths.wordpress.com. Thank you. I can check that out as well. One thing I do want to add about the war in Iraq, and Roger, you just reminded me, is that, there were some people who did speak out against it, and they were quickly removed from media. And one of them was Phil Donahue. My mom used to watch him. He had a talk show. He was against the war in Iraq. And just like that, Phil was gone. Now let's go ahead and get into the story about Glenn Greenwald, because we're going to make a connection here. So the name of this, where'd I go? Okay, there we go. The name of this video is called Glenn Greenwald Discusses the Importance of Independent Journalism in the Online Age. Now this is on a channel called Futo. So definitely check that out. But I want you to hear what he says about, again, he's going to make the connection between media and war and independent media. And let's see if you can make the connection between what Chris was talking about and what he's talking about. So, all right, here we go.
What, in a kind of very cringe way, in retrospect, was called the blogosphere, because it had influenced me first. I was a reader of it and a consumer of it before becoming a participant in it. And it was incredibly valuable because at the time in those early 2000s, there was a kind of repression that grew out of the 9/11 attack that naturally arises whenever a country feels besieged by a foreign enemy. And there was less dissent in mainstream media discourse permitted. Obviously, that was one of the major reasons the Iraq War was allowed to happen based on false pretenses, was because there was very little questioning of the government's claims and
Okay, so again, here he is. So he's bringing up the war in Iraq. And like he said, back then, there was very little questioning. Again, you guys, like, for those of you who weren't around then, or you may have been really young at that time and didn't understand what was going on, there just weren't many people offering some type of alternative message. And so when you read these things, when I watched the news, I mean, it was easier to believe it and not question it, right? Someone said, look at the computer behind him. Yeah, I did notice that when I first saw this clip. I don't know. Yeah, that's from like back in the day. All right, let's go back in.
And propaganda. And so this kind of independent sector of what became the media, which was people who weren't media professionals, hadn't gone to Columbia Journalism School, had never worked at the New York Times. Instead, were just kind of informed citizens who had very well-developed critiques and often very virulent critiques of mainstream media institutions, were able to reach first on their own a kind of large audience because there were so many other people similarly disenchanted, and there was no intervention on the part of Google or other big tech companies. Quite the contrary, as you said, the intention at the time was to develop tools to enable people to communicate with one another without the interference by the government or by large corporations. And that was the model that grew out of Silicon Valley. I think it was kind of a libertarian ideology that drove it in the beginning, and it succeeded. It's what reached me and ultimately began changing my thinking about how I understood the world, and then motivated me to go one day very spontaneously with no plan and just click create blog on what was Google's platform called Blogspot, free platform. And you
So one thing he mentioned here, I'm sorry, I missed that part, but I do want to play this where he said about intervention. Listen to this.
Well-developed critiques and often very virulent critiques of mainstream media institutions were able to reach first on their own a kind of large audience because there were so many other people similarly disenchanted, and there was no intervention on the part of Google or other big tech companies. Quite the contrary, as you said, the intention at the time was to develop tools to enable people to communicate with one another without the interference by the government or by large corporations. And
okay, that piece right there, the tool, the goal at the time was to create another source of media that would not have that interference from the United States government, or notice he also said, or from corporations. That was the intent. That was the goal, right? Because he knew, like even back then, he obviously knew that mainstream media was heavily influenced by the US government and the talking points from the State Department. So that was the goal. Now, obviously back then, did they necessarily know that, like the Mark Zuckerberg story I talked about on Friday, did they know at the time when they created these platforms and they created other alternatives that some way or another, the US government would still find their way of getting in there and trying to disrupt shit? Probably not. But, you know, things were different back then.
that was the model that grew out of Silicon Valley. I think it was kind of a libertarian ideology that drove it in the beginning, and it succeeded. It's what reached me and ultimately began changing my thinking about how I understood the world, and then motivated me to go one day very spontaneously with no plan and just click create blog on what was Google's platform called Blogspot, free platform. And you just created a blog, and if you were writing things that people were interested in, you were able to find an audience, in part because other bloggers would promote your work, but also because Google itself would do so. And there were a lot of times I would write about something, and if I Googled that topic, you know, maybe the first result would be the New York Times, and the second would be NBC News, and the third or the fourth would be mine.
And then the algorithm changed. So Glenn just said that back then, during that time, Google would also promote his work. That don't really happen anymore. Like Google would promote his work. So he said you might see a CNN, there was a topic you would search, you might see CNN, you might see MSNBC, and then you would see Glenn Greenwald's work. This is how the algorithm has changed. Because now if I search for a topic in Google, if I really want to look for someone that's independent media, I have to put in their name behind it. Otherwise, it just does not come up for me. It's just all mainstream media. Interesting, huh? See how things change? See how they change the algorithm? Thank you for the reminder, Eric. I need to take some tips from CJ because I'm horrible at this. But you guys, please go ahead and hit the like button. I always forget to. I'm terrible at it. Hit the like button. That helps me with the algorithm, guys. I see we have over 600 people watching. I don't know how many likes there are. I'm looking at StreamYard, but let's go ahead and get those likes up there for me. Thank you so much. So the algorithm changed, and it makes it more difficult for people to find independent media, and that was on purpose.
And it was a very egalitarian playing field that enabled me to find a large audience despite having the backing of no media corporation. That's one of the reasons I value that freedom so much.
Yeah, right. I mean, I remember in 2004, 2003, Yahoo was just incredibly focused on the fact that Google was eating our lunch for search. So
Hold on, is that a Commodore? That is a Commodore. Holy crap. Do you guys see this in the background? That's a Commodore in the Oh my God. Sorry, let's get back to the story.
both companies, we had capitalism working the way it was supposed to. We had two companies, we had a couple others too, that were fiercely competing. And the only job they saw was to connect people doing searches with relevant content. That's all they wanted to do.
I think that the ethos of the internet, and I remember going, back to the mid 90s, which is the first time I encountered the internet. I began using these political debate forums inside of these walled off communities of CompuServe and AOL that were thriving and stimulating because they were different, precisely because their anonymity allowed a kind of greater mental freedom, that you knew the things you were writing weren't connected on your permanent record to your name. And it enabled people to express themselves with a kind of greater amount of just freedom and individuality. I think when people know that they're being monitored, and there's psychological studies that demonstrate this, it's the reason I regard the right of privacy as so important. Their behavior becomes much more conformist, becomes the byproduct of societal expectations and orthodoxies rather than autonomy and agency. And it's always in the realm of privacy when you can say things and do things without, the judgmental eyes of other people being cast upon you. That's where dissent and creativity and individuality flourishes, really where it exclusively resides. And that was the ethos of the internet at the beginning. And even
I just want to jump in and say, in reference to the creativity and censorship, when I'll say more so YouTube, when they ramp up censorship, it stifles creativity. I can just tell you that from my own experience here. It really does. There are so many other things that I would do, like with my show, but I can't because of the censorship. There are so many other things that I would add that would make it even more entertaining, but I can't because of the censorship. And it's a buzzkill sometimes. Like it sucks because I'm limited in what I can do creatively, and that can be really frustrating. And I'm not talking about nothing. Never mind. I'll go back in the video. I'm not talking about the type of entertainment some of you are thinking. Let's just go in here.
And once these large corporations like Google and Yahoo started to develop it and exploit it, there was still no sense that they were doing so with the intention of allowing it to be controlled, let alone censored. It was to empower and liberate. And that was the early model.
Right. I mean, that's exactly what we wanted. So you wound up working with more traditional journalism for a bit, right? And then you wound up, now today you're primarily on Substack, right?
Yeah, it's kind of come full circle.
Has it come full circle? Like, is Substack for you, is it as free as it was back in 15 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. When I was blogging, I started finding a way to make a living, which was simply by relying once a year on the donations of readers who were donating based on the idea that they wanted me to be able to continue to do that work and not have to go work for large media corporations. And then because I had a large audience and that became the currency in the digital age of media companies, they knew they needed individuals with large followings to bring their audience to those sites, because it started to become very much based on a traffic model rather than just relying on traditional advertiser relationships. I always conditioned my willingness to go work for them, first at Salon and then The Guardian. Into my contract was written the explicit right that I had, which is very unusual, almost unprecedented actually, that I would be able to publish directly to the internet without editorial interference unless I requested it.
That's one of the things that I did notice. Like, for those who don't know, if you're new here, I actually majored in broadcast journalism in undergrad, broadcast journalism in English. I didn't end up finding a job in broadcast journalism that would actually pay me enough at the time to pay like my rent. And that's important. So that's how I ended up in education. But I actually majored in broadcast journalism. And one of the things I did know when I was doing internships, you know, when you're working for a corporation, whether it's, I don't know, a radio station or a local TV news, whichever, you really don't have as much say-so as you think that you would. By the time the editors get a hold of your story, whether it was something that you wrote, whether it was news that you reported out in the field, a lot of times I was out in the field, whether it was that type of job per se, even as like an intern, by the time they got a hold of your work, it wasn't even what you created anymore. They would just remove so much of it that it didn't feel like it was even you anymore. And I've seen this multiple times. There are multiple times where I interviewed people and they would actually cut out the stories. I hate to say this, but back then it was called the village idiot. I don't know if people still use that term, but they would cut out the stories of the people that we would interview that, I don't know, technically were whatever you want to call it, like educated or whatever. They would cut out those people and they would like purposely, they would put in the interviews of the people that they could make fun of. And they used to call it the village idiot. And I remember like saying to myself, like, well, no, I'm not going to get video footage of someone or interview someone who's walking around with the kid and the kid like obviously is going through something. They maybe not have shoes on or something. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. They would keep that in and they would take out the stories that, you know, it didn't make any sense to me. They wanted people to appear to be like a stereotype. Whenever I interviewed Black people, it's like they would remove the Black interviews where people, like it was someone just getting off from work. And like, let's say they had on a suit or they had on business casual. That what we're calling it these days. They were dressed like business casually. They wouldn't keep those in. But they would want us to go out and interview Black people that didn't have shoes on, that were like missing teeth. And not just Black people, like whenever they sent us to like certain areas that they would call like impoverished areas, they wanted us to get the people that looked like that. And I'm like, that's not funny. So I don't know. When you go and you work for them and people who have done this before and they now do independent media, they can tell you about it as well. Like you're censored by them too. Like by the time they edit your material, it's not even what you intended it to be anymore. And that's why some people go over to independent media. It's just the reality.
So for me, and then when I obviously left The Guardian to start The Intercept and create it, I didn't do it in order to impose more restrictions on myself. I did it to preserve that freedom, not just for myself, but for other people. So in each of those contracts was written that freedom. So I always had the same kind of full editorial autonomy and journalistic independence that I had going all the way back to that little blog of mine. But the problem became that the more you attach yourself to an institution and become the spokesperson for it, or you become dependent on a particular political faction, the more this kind of censorship and repression starts to seep into your brain in a kind of subliminal way. You may not even be aware of the ways in which you're being constrained. And it was only once I left The Intercept and returned to a fully independent model, which is Substack, where it's a very similar model to what I was relying on in 2005 in the sense that I rely on, it's not now donations, it's subscriptions, but it's the same thing. It's my readership willingly paying for my work, and they're essentially the only boss I have. It's where most of my income comes from, and it will work and is working only to the extent that Substack and its founders and managers remain committed to this model of refusing to capitulate to societal pressure, and especially from liberal establishments that they deplatform people deemed unsuitable to be heard. And so far, Substack has been impressively defiant in doing so. But Substack still hasn't quite grown into the magnitude of a media player that they need to in order for us to really know how committed they are to resisting that.
Yeah, I will say I have been, advertising Substack more. I have been telling like my friends and former students of mine about Substack. A lot of people still don't know about it. I'm surprised. I'm like, there's all these great voices on Substack, but it still hasn't really reached the masses, so to speak. So that is something I would like for you guys to share with your friends and stuff, to let them know. Like when I read these like Substack articles on here, tell your friends, like, you guys need to get on Substack if you want to hear like great voices that you're not going to be able to hear necessarily on mainstream media. So that is something I do wish like it was out there more. I'm not going to play the entire interview, but again, the name of this interview is called Glenn Greenwald Discusses the Importance of Independent Journalism in the Online Age. And this interview took place this month, and it's on FoodTube is the name of the channel there. So you see the connection between the two stories. Chris Hedges is letting you know that as long as there are these never-ending wars, there will always be censorship. And then you have Glenn Greenwald discussing where he kind of got started during the war in Iraq, and he realizes, well, wait a minute, there's other voices out there, there's other opinions that people aren't getting a chance to hear because mainstream media is controlling the narrative. So, and then he goes into the censorship aspect of it, of like, yeah, well, I have to kind of, switch to Substack and do these other alternatives because, there's certain places they're censoring people now, also on some of these other platforms. So at the end of the day, a lot of times it seems like it comes down to war. And if you look at a lot of the people that have been attacked, that are being smeared, that have been removed from these platforms, what do they all have in common? They all tend to be anti-war. Lee Camp, Tara Reid, both were removed from Spotify. Chris Hedges, Abby Martin, remember all of them? They lost their shows also at RT. That's something they all have in common. Same thing. Jesse Ventura, also anti-war. Coincidence? Nah, I think not. Let me go ahead and go to some of these comments here. And I do think, yeah. Yes, thank you for the reminder. I just noticed that Sabby's going on the left lens tonight. Double dose of Sabby tonight. Thank you, reminder, Dessert Mantis. Yes. Myself and Bank Sisters, we will be on the left lens, which is Danny Haifong's show tonight. I believe he's starting at 9:30. I will be on there at 10 o'clock. We're going on there to promote Camp Dada, which is this weekend. I'm really excited about that, you guys. I'll get into that in just a second. Thank you for the super chat, Doc. Independent media favors anti-war voices, so we need censorship to gaslight people for wars. Please don't tell anyone. Yep, that's a good way of putting it, Doc. And thank you for the super sticker, Close-ish Town 1. Close in H-Town 1. Close in H-Town 1. You must be from Houston. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Oh, yeah, there's the Astros. Oh, the Astros. Ooh. Sorry. Red Sox fan here, so We got beef. We got coach beef. We don't really have player beef. We got coach beef. Terry says, I never heard of Substack. Yeah, Terry, definitely check it out. Let me see if Eric, if you want to put the Substack link in the I forgot what I did with it, but Chris Hedges one in the chat so people can see. My newsletter is actually on Substack too. That's really what that is. Like for those of you that click on that, that's Substack. Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. See, Glenn Greenwald Substack there. You'll find a lot of people on there, you guys. If you want to hear, alternative media, definitely check it out on Substack. So really cool. Really cool. Okay. Tim said H-Town is a Korean supermarket. I thought that was H-Mart. Well, here it's called H-Mart. I don't know. Yes. Thank you guys so much for that. So yeah, guys, this weekend I will be going to New York. I will be with the Bank Sisters and apparently like 30 other activists. We are going to have, great time this weekend. We have activist events planned, a couple of protesting actions that we're going to be doing, and also skill sharing too, which I'm really excited about. So we'll get to teach each other different types of skills. I'm really excited to get out there. I really do. I don't know. I did consider myself to be an extrovert until the pandemic started. So I don't know. Maybe I'm like a extroverted introvert now. I don't know. But yeah, this will do me some good to get out there. And again, this is all for, fighting back, like trying to make some rich people upset. Basically. But yeah, really excited for the skill sharing as well. I'll be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'll be back on Monday, back home on Monday, but I won't be streaming Monday night. So sorry, guys, I won't be with you Friday night and I won't be with you Monday night. I am going to film some of the actions that we have there in New York while I'm there, and we'll get that edited and uploaded, and I can do that as a premiere. So after Thursday night, you will see me live again Tuesday night. So we'll have clips uploaded for those days that I'm not here as usual, but really excited for this. For those of you who don't know, and Roger Meadows is the one who told me to say this. He's like, Sabby, you need to tell people that you're not a YouTuber. You're an activist with a YouTube show. And that's something we used to say in the beginning, like when we first, with RBN in the beginning, we used to tell people that we were activists that actually found a way to put our activism online. And sometimes I forget to say that. So I'm saying that. And I have noticed, like, it's a lot of people watching for a Monday. Is Jimmy not on tonight? I'm sorry. I just realized that. It kind of hit me. I'm like, tonight's Monday. Okay. So that's that for me, you guys. Again, we're going to give a shout out here to, Bad Cookie says, have a great time, Sabby. Bring us some souvenirs. Oh, thank you so much, Bad Cookies. And again, the comment of the night, I think, goes to Colin. Shout out to Colin. I have $18,000 in student debt left, and I'm up to have all of my debt forgiven as I had a Pell Grant in college. I'm still not voting Democrat. Everyone give a shout out to Colin doing the damn thing. Other than that, guys, I'm out of here. Catch me tonight on the Left Lens with the Bank Sisters at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.